Hey Ryan, how do I get project-based learning started at my school? I've gotten some form of this question nearly every day for the last decade from engaged educators just like you. So at Magnify Learning, we've created a free download to get you started. Whether you're a superintendent, principal, coach, or teacher, go to whatispbl.com to get started on your project-based learning journey today. Are you ready to bring project-based learning to your school? The PBL Simplified podcast will help equip you for your PBL journey with weekly need-to-knows, engaging interviews, PBL showcases from facilitators in the classroom, and PBL leadership episodes to move you towards a successful implementation of PBL. Because every learner deserves to be a part of an inspiring story, and we see daily that project-based learning helps make this happen. If you want me to answer your PBL need-to-know on the podcast, visit whatispbl.com and click on Ask Ryan to submit your question. Welcome to the PBL Simplified podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Stoyer, and I am more fired up than ever about 51 by 2051, getting 51% of schools, the majority of schools, to be using project-based learning by 2051. It seems like just the right amount of time. We got a couple decades to figure this out, and I think we're on the right track. I have been with some really fired up educators as well, and I'm more and more encouraged. We just set goals in the last episode, and goals are just filled with hope and joy and the future, and that will get you fired up. And that's why you've got to start now. Do them in December. Don't wait for January. Take some time, write them out, be specific. Make sure it's not a to-do list. Make sure it's a passion list. Make sure that when you look at your goals, you get fired up, right? You have some long-term goals, then break them down 1, 3 years, right back to what you need to do starting in January, right? You've got some time. So go into the new year with momentum. Don't go in tired. Get fired up. Get your goals moving. This is good work. And you're not the only one doing this work. There are others doing it around the world. In fact, today our PBL showcase is going to be with Banff Academy from Scotland. So we're going to be talking about some friends that are running PBL. They've got a PBL school that they've started, and they're on fire. And you're going to love the conversation, I think. I know I did. We're just so like-minded, love where they're at and where their mind at and where they're going. But before we get into that interview, we got to hit our need to know. And our need to know today came from a live workshop that I was doing in Kentucky a couple weeks ago. And the question was super good, right? Because we always give examples. Everybody wants to say, I want to see examples of project-based learning in action. And you can go to a site. You know, I highly recommend that. Find a place near you or maybe afar. We've got recommendations, but go see it. And so sometimes we do video though, right? If you can't see it. So you watch a video and hopefully it's well done, right? Like you want it to be well done. But sometimes when it's so polished, you're like, is that real? Like what's really going on there? So the need to know that again came from a really great heart of helping kids was I've seen PBL work in what looks like a private school. They had uniforms on. They were all doing what they were supposed to be doing. But what about like my school? What about a comprehensive public high school? Like, what does it look like there? And I paraphrased a bit, but that's where the question came from. It came from this idea of, I've seen it in the polished videos. What about in my school? And that's really what we all ask. Like when we say, I want to see it in action, I really want to know, does it work in my school? When you see research, you want to say, does it work in my school? But I'm going to point you back to episode 88. Is when we started the school design process of how do you bring in project-based learning to your school or your district. It's episode 88, and it starts with the research. And the Lucas Foundation did some really, really good research around this. And it's, when I say really good, I mean it's not anecdotal. It's randomized studies. They're very well done. And to try to answer this question well of, what about in my school, this comprehensive public high school where, my learners have a lot of maybe disadvantages or they have some learning gaps or, hey, what about my kids, right? Is really what we're asking. I think they did a good job of answering that question. Lucas Education Research, and it's linked in that episode 88, so go back to that to see it for yourself. But let me read some of it to you. This is just from kind of the overview. It says the researchers examined the impact of project-based learning on AP U.S. government, AP environmental science courses, in 5 predominantly urban districts around the country. A higher proportion of the students were from low-income households than is typical of AP test-taking community. That's notable as policymakers and educators are trying to get more underrepresented students enrolled in passing AP courses. So one of the studies, several studies, I guess, but one of the sections they focused on was AP courses. But note where they looked for those student samples, as it is in underrepresented learners. Let me look at another one. Sorry, I'm pausing because I'm reading. I don't usually get to read to you, but I want you to look at this one as well. Again, episode 88, I'd really draw this out. But my point is that the research that they did, one, it's randomized, it's powerful, but two, it's in the communities that you're working in, right? And again, if you're in a private school listening to that, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But that's where the question came from. So let me see. Again, they're looking in these U.S. public schools, and here's the results. They have strong and positive effects on student outcomes across grade levels and subject areas. So they're in the schools that you're in, right? They didn't cherry pick the schools so that they got really great results. They went to schools and said, look, project-based learning works. So they went into, I'm reading here, but struggling readers, right? They showed that high-quality professional development, which is necessary for teachers to switch from a traditional form of instruction to rigorous PBL. So they went in and did multiple schools that are your comprehensive public schools that you are currently working in. So wherever you're at, PBL is working. Now, again, when I tell you the research, you're still going to say, what about my school? What I want you to start with is it will work in your school. You have to start with that belief. And where does that belief come from? Is that's where the research does come in, right? Or again, you can go see it. If you want to say, hey, I want to see it with my own eyes, call me up, right? Call me up, hit me up. I will send you to some places where you can see it, and then you can believe it, and then you can do it, right? The process is all there, and we want you to join the movement. So again, I'm a little fired up today, so maybe that's a fired up answer, but my fired up answer is that this has to be here for our learners that are struggling or they're in those underrepresented communities, because if we just do skill and drill, it does not close the achievement gap. It's the exact opposite of what those learners need. If they have a learning gap, they need additional context. They need additional handles to put that skill and drill to. If you just do skill and drill and it stays abstract, we're actually doing a disservice to those learners. They need project-based learning. They need community partners, one, to show that they care, but two, to get to the rigorous, deeper learning that you want them to have. I get the question often, is like, well, my learners are too low to do project-based learning. And the answer is that if your learners are low, they have to be doing project-based learning. So that's a stance that I'm going to move forward on, and I'll continue to refine that idea. But we've really got to push back on this idea that we need skill and drill so that we can get to project-based learning. It's the exact opposite. We need to give context through project-based learning so that then we can build the skills. So if you are looking to build a project-based learning school, you are in the right place and you're on the right episode. We're going to talk with Banff Academy in Scotland, and they have started a movement, and I love the way that they've started. And it's gradually, and it's building, and it's gaining momentum, and it's going to be hugely successful. Super excited for you to talk to my friends there. Enjoy the episode. Welcome, PBL Simplified Podcast. Really excited for our episode today. We've got some school leaders that are a little bit farther away from us than typical. So we've got Banff Academy from Scotland here today. We've got Nick and we've got Hannah. Super excited to have you guys here to hear about the pioneering work that you guys are doing with project-based learning. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we're going to jump into our typical questions with why. Would you give us a little bit of a background about kind of what your role is at Banff Academy so that our listeners know kind of who they're hearing from?
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone. And my name is Nick Mochan, and my role at Banff Academy is deputy head teacher. And on my remit, I suppose, in terms of this, would be all things teaching and learning. So I have a big responsibility of just ensuring that the teaching and learning across all of our school from age 12 to 18, I suppose, is as good as it can be.
And I'm Hannah Clark. I'm the principal teacher of project-based learning at Banff Academy. It's a fairly new role, but it's expanding by the week. I work with Nick a lot as Deputy of Learning and Teaching, but we now have a team of 3 project-based learning teachers, as well as an outdoor learning coordinator.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we talked a little bit off the air that part of Nick's role is to kind of protect project-based learning as well. So we kind of said that he's like the superhero of PBL, and so our audience is educational leaders, and leaders as you're listening, like you listen to Nick's answers today and Hannah's answers. Like it's important that you have a Nick in there, right? That's looking at the big picture, protecting from larger district or state or federal mandates that come down. Like how do we protect really great learning? And it's really something that we need to dive into deeper. And maybe we'll try to get into that today. So, but before we do that, we always start every podcast interview with, what is your why for education? So I don't know who wants to start, but what's your why for education?
Yeah, I'll start with that. So for me, it's all about lifelong learning. So I kind of believe that inside every learner is a whole abundance of potential and talent, and it's our roles as teachers and educators. It's a massive job just to kind of get alongside them and work more collaboratively with them to unlock this, and just trying to connect to them as a person to make sure that we can kind of spark the curiosity that's already existing inside them, to provide motivation to be the best version of themselves. And I follow and do a lot of reading, and one person I really like is the Simon Sinek thing, where he's got the why. So I love that we're starting with the why. So that's where I love to start too. And for me, it just fits in really nicely, the why, how, what. But then the one thing I like to think about before we get into that is the who. So, for me, it's about who's sitting in front of me and who's in each class, and seeing them as an individual, because a lot of what we do in education is about standardizing and about trying to get everybody to fit the best model. But for me, and why I love PBL so much, it sees the child as an individual and how I can support and facilitate them to be the best version of themselves. So it's just about creating learning experiences that focuses on them and about promoting their health and well-being and making them learners for life, rather than just jumping through the narrow, like focus on getting a pass at the next exam, where that learning has no connection to anything that's meaningful to themselves.
Yeah, I feel like our whys are very similar, and that's probably why we work quite well together. For me, it's about giving students opportunities to discover their full potential, as you said, Nick, to be happy, to be healthy, to be successful, lifelong learners. And that is one of the key focuses of our school. I think project-based learning achieves this by giving them the authentic and meaningful learning experiences where they can connect with their community and the wider world, develop the skills, grow their character, and empowers those individuals and inspires them to go on and make a difference. And that's why I love my job so much.
Yeah, I love it. And you guys you're in the right place, and you're going to bring a lot of value to our audience. Love that. Nick, you just added who to the why, how, what for us. Like, I love that. That's so good. And so important. I think even in project-based learning, like design thinking starts with the empathy stage, right? Of like, let's listen to our audience. And it's one thing we kind of wrestle with at Magnify Learning, is like, how do we bring that stage in? At some point we're just going to dump that in there somewhere, the who, the empathy stage, because it's so important. It can come out, but we want to make sure it comes out. So I love that came out first question. So love your guys' enthusiasm. Why did you start a school with project-based learning?
Yeah, so for us, again, it was we did a lot of looking outwards, and a big part of my role was that. So, we knew what we had in school was a lot of good stuff and a lot of good teaching and learning was going on. But again, what's great about our jobs is it's never complete. There's always room for improvement. So we did a lot of looking out, and that started years ago. I mean, our head teacher here actually did a study trip out to Finland, because that was seen as one of the the areas to go in terms of PISA assessments and things. So he went out there to see what was going on and what makes them so good. And then thanks to the Accelerate group as well, we've actually been out to across the pond to where you are in Nashville, and we've been down to see XP Doncaster. So lots of looking at other schools matched up with, researchers out there. I love Ken Robinson, so a lot of what he talks about. And that kind of that sort of started this thought process in my head about what we can do better, and then match that up with the way that the labor market's going, and how things change so quickly. I didn't feel like we were getting it right, and we weren't providing the best sort of education for our young people. So that then made us kind of come across what we had seen in terms of project-based learning, and it just fitted. It came at exactly the right time for COVID had hit as well. So we were looking, and we had that momentum to make a really big, significant change in what we were doing. So PBL seemed to be the answer, because it fitted with, well, what learning approach can we use that's going to give our kids the 21st century skills that are required, that's going to meet that skills gap in the labor market we're talking about, that's going to inspire teaching and learning and make them get up off their phones. A big driver in our school is mental health and well-being, and we try and promote that in every possible way we can. And we do believe that if kids are engaged in learning and teaching, then that's going to have a positive impact on their mental health. So it was trying to make that learning much more meaningful for them. So we kind of came across project-based learning, and we seen it, and then that was what we did. And we've started to roll it out with the help of Hannah, and we've started a little pilot scheme, and that's just growing and growing and growing. And now we've got a whole sort of PBL faculty on the go, which is fantastic. But I probably should say that, our school started with it through a lot of brave leadership. And we couldn't have done it again without our head teacher and without the space from our authority as well to go out and try and seek these new ways of working, and allowing it to, if we fail, we fail. But it's the system we've already got, I see, that's broken. So there's no, it's not going to hurt to try something new, because what we're already doing isn't the best it can be, is the way I would see that. So PBL is about taking learning into the real world and making it as authentic and as meaningful for pupils with personal relevance. So it's about creating a school for pupils that exists in the current world that they can relate to. Because right now, I don't think a lot of learning that exists in classrooms across the world, kids do relate to that. So PBL was the answer to make that relationship. So it's about giving kids a sense of belonging, and that was crucial for their health and well-being.
I love the term brave leadership, Nick. Like I heard, it took brave leadership to say, hey, something doesn't quite connect here. Like our learners aren't getting all the skills that they need to be successful in their next steps. And then the brave leadership part is, I'm going to do something about that, right? And I can't tell you it's going to work perfectly. Can't tell you it's going to be great, but we're going to move in that direction because it's the right thing for kids. And that's a great why to start PBL at your school. And so what does that look like for you guys in your area? Are there other PBL schools? Like, you did some visits. I do have to say, like, for the leaders listening, like Nick just walked through a lot of the steps that we recommend of how you get started. So well done, right? Like, you notice something's not quite right. You do some research, you go and visit, go see other ecosystems that are working well, start small, and then you can start to expand that movement as you see success in your own area. It's really like walking right down the steps that we would recommend. So I loved hearing your story in that regard. But what does it look like for you guys? Are you kind of the first followers and kind of blazing this trail, or do you have some other collaborators in your area?
Yeah, so in terms of us in Scotland, I would say we are kind of pioneering it, and we're blazing the trail, which again comes with problems, but also comes with solutions, and it gives us the space to work and make it fit our context. So sometimes that means we have to find a solution that's best fit for us, rather than seeing what works somewhere else. And sometimes that's harder to change what works for somebody else to fit us. But definitely kind of pioneer it. But there is other schools we work with. So I would have to make reference to the Wood Foundation is an organization that is working really heavily in the Northeast here to do just what I said. They're looking at how we can make the learning experience more suitable to meet the demands of, future jobs markets. So they've supplied a lot of professional learning and a lot of support, and they've got a lot of schools in the Northeast. So in terms of our sort of cohort that went out, there was 4 other schools that went out to visit Nashville, and so we worked quite collaboratively with them in terms of sharing ideas, and we have regular meetups with other schools or other leaders within that school to talk about all things PBL. And in fact, we've got one just tomorrow. Is that right? Yeah, we've got one tomorrow again where we'll get a chance to share our good practice, see what's working for them, and then just even have that time to just reflect on how far we've come and talk to each other about collaborating going forward. So Yeah, small little 4 group, but that's expanding every
there's 11
year.
now.
Yeah, and there's 11 now, so quite a lot. It's growing every year. It grows.
But it's just in our little pocket of the northeast of Scotland.
Yeah.
At the moment, the program is aiming for system level change.
Yeah.
Yeah, but again, that's a brilliant place to start, right? Is you start small and you grow. Don't go it alone, right? You might have to go it alone for a little bit, but what happens is when you put your shining light out there, other people are like, oh, yeah, I also see a disconnect. I want to be with other people that see that disconnect and want to help fix that, right? So you get this collaborative group that's can be really powerful and really strong to start building, what works in your specific area. So again, that's a great way to grow. We've seen that work really well. So the other thing that we like to highlight at Magnify Learning and on the podcast is student stories. Like we just love stories. We think they tell a lot and a lot of lessons can be learned. So can you give us one of your highlights from Banff, a student story?
Yeah, we're still very much in the early stages of implementing project-based learning, but at the moment, any presentation of learning is a highlight for us where you can really see the students' pride in their work, how they articulate their learning and the skills that they're developing and experiencing that meaningful feedback and reflection. But for me, one of my highlights was our first project-based learning class, which was a pilot class of 14 students who were fairly disengaged elsewhere in the curriculum. And they came together to form a class just once a week. And they looked at the driving question, how can I make a difference to my community? So our entry event looked at the film adaptation of The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, and we started discussing community, philanthropy, entrepreneurship, innovation to get them engaged with the project. They then identified local community heroes and interviewed them to find out what they do in our local area. And then they researched global influencers throughout history, and today they've had an impact on their own communities. We then went a community walk around our local area to start identifying social issues. And then they researched charities and organisations locally that could help them address those social issues. So their final product was to create a product for their chosen charity and social issue and enter into the Scottish Youth Philanthropy Initiative, where they could win a £3,000 grant for their chosen social issue and charity to have a direct impact on our local community. And it was the presentation of learning for me that has been the highlight of my teaching career so far. And that was the first one we did, where we really saw how proud they were of themselves in their work, the realization that their work was going to have a direct impact on our community, on our school, how proud people were of them as well, but also to see how they'd grown as individuals throughout the project. And when it came to that final presentation of learning stage, I thought, this works. And we should all be doing this. And this is clearly the benefits from that. And the relationships that were developed, not just between myself and the class, but across the learning community. They worked with partners, and they worked with our business community support lead, those local hero connections with other members of staff around the school was just invaluable. And that is the highlight, not just of project-based learning, but of my teaching career so far.
Yeah,
and it's been difficult to adapt that to a full year. That was just one class.
And I think I want to just come in quickly and say, I think Hannah is being quite modest, because that group of learners she did it with were, fair to say, hugely disengaged. So the fact that she could do that with them learners at that time and being her first time doing that was amazing. And that resonated with just more than Hannah. So she's saying it's a highlight of her teaching career, but I think that had waves and ripples that went out, and that created a lot of momentum that we could then use to springboard what we're doing now.
Yeah. And we did showcase that. The presentation of learning, it was an emotional day. It was emotional for the students. It was emotional for me. There was the partners and the panel of judges that they presented to, the learning coaches that we had involved that were supporting the class, and the class mentors. There was a lot of, it was just so powerful to see that emotional connection to learning. And the impact that it had on them as individuals. And it's something they keep referring back to. That's now 2 years ago since our first one. And when you pass them in the corridor, they talk about it. They've mentioned it on their CVs and their job applications. Now some of them have left school. and it's grown since then, since our first pilot class. And now you can see it for those that are disengaged, but those who are engaged and are the high flyers in the class, it just allows them to fly and soar and lead their own learning in ways that they possibly couldn't in a regular curriculum.
Yeah, that's so good. There's so many gems in there. Just the idea that as you guys are starting now, it's not like, hey, this worked in Finland or this worked in Tennessee. It's like, what? Like, come see, like it works here, like with our learners, and even the learners that you don't think it should work with, right? Like it worked with them. And that's one of the strongest areas I think project-based learning brings is the engagement. Like the engagement level goes up. And I always do this. The podcast is audio, but I always move my hands. It's like when engagement goes up, then the rigor can go up, right? So that's where we want to take our learners. We still want them to get to the rigor. We want them to get to do better on their standardized tests, all those pieces. So it's not engagement for engagement's sake. It's engagement so that we can get to rigor, which you probably normally couldn't with those learners, right? Because they were so disengaged. Now that's excellent. That's exciting.
Yeah. You
mentioned community partners. So how does that work? Like, how do they fit into your PBL work? Why are they so important? Like you did a community walk, which I love. It's active. Your learners are they're now identifying problems. And then you've switched it. It's not just like, hey, there's a problem. It's, hey, there's a problem. And I think I might have a solution for that, right? Like I can be a part of the solution. And if we got every learner to do that, like that literally changes the world, right? Like it's not just there's a problem. I hope somebody fixes it. It's like there's a problem and I could probably solve that. But all that involves community partners and a community aspect. So can you guys just talk a little bit more about what PBL means to the community and why community partners are so important?
Yeah, sure. I love this question because it's so important. I know you just said that it's that relationship between the school and the community that makes the preparation of the young person to be successful so important. And like we I suppose for our school we restarted big on that was the creation of what we call our SLP, which is our school leaver profile. And that heavily involved our local community, businesses around there, all of our stakeholders, young people, parents. But in terms of the community, just everybody had an input into what a school leaver should look like when they leave Banff Academy. And that asking them to be involved in that was our sort of first part of our co-creation, to use that language. And that has then been a beacon, if you like, our North Star of like where we then go with our teaching and learning. And that supports so much our why are we using PBL, because to create learning experiences that feed into them skills that were identified from our community, we can't do that so well as in the traditional sense. Doing it as a project-based learning experience just fits much easier, and the pupils can see that because it's not just come from the teacher. It's come from a place, maybe somebody they relate to, maybe it's people that they aspire to be like or careers they want to go into. So that's why I love that question, because it's so crucial to everything we do. And we're not there yet because we are just starting out in terms of the co-creation of a PBL. But that is definitely where we will get to, and that will happen sooner rather than later, hopefully.
We're getting there.
We're getting there, yeah. But that's like one of my questions when we come into like Hannah's PBL hub in our school. It's like one of the first things I always say is like, is there co-creation or is there community connectedness? And I'm always saying, is it going to solve like a real life problem in our community? Because that's where I get really excited about them. But yeah, it's big for us, and it's so important in our community because it's about creating that pipeline of talent for businesses to ensure that our pupils thrive in our community. And it's about making our community as good as the community can be as well. So yes, we want to create talented kids that maybe want to fly the nest and go and explore the world and do massive, wonderful things. But if they can do that from within our own community, then that's adding to our community as well. So it's a hugely important ingredient. And that structure and partnership between the school and the community is only being increased and improved through using project-based learning. I'd say it's far stronger now since we went down that kind of road. And again, it's answering that, like, I mean, when kids put their hands up in a class, it used to always be, why are we learning this? Or the second time, can I go to the toilet? But now in project-based learning classrooms, they understand the why. And that's because we've involved the community.
Yeah.
We can sit it and they see how it fits in, and it's going to make an impact on their lives or their parents' lives or within their local community. fantastic. And that comes all the way back around to our big driver in terms of health and well-being, and especially recovering from COVID. It's something that there's a lot of space to work more collaboratively together in terms of producing that and supporting our community as we still recover from all of that. So yeah, community connectedness. And most teachers, I always think about it this way: most teachers came to school, they experienced school, they go to university, and they graduate, then work in schools. So they haven't seen the businesses, they haven't experienced that, which is why that ingredient is so important, because we have to ask the experts. And if we're standing on top of a class, hearing it from a teacher, the kids sometimes they're like, yeah, okay, but you haven't lived that, you haven't seen that. So when they come in, even if it's a video or if they're physically in the classroom, then you can see the kids sort of sit up and they've got lots of questions, and the curiosity, the room's buzzing again because they want to be involved and they understand that the learning is meaningful, it has a relevance, and it has a place that's connected to whatever they want to do. So yeah, it's so important, and we'll never get bored, or we'll never want to stop involving our community. The more we can involve them, the better, in terms of just improving that skill shortage and providing opportunities for our kids to thrive in our local community.
And we have a role in the school, a business community support lead called Lucy, and every school should have a Lucy. She's so enthusiastic about connecting with these community and business partners, but it's her role to seek them out and to have she's got such a vast expanse of these partners network. She's got a network of these community and business partners to create an authentic link to not just our community, but the wider world, and to offer insights into potential careers for our pupils as well, whilst they get involved in the projects. Whilst we're planning a project, we get in touch with her, and we might have a potential partner in mind, but she also has that network to fall back on where she can bring in that expertise. So far in the past couple of years, we've worked with local businesses, charities, health workers, but we've also recently worked with a CID detective, a member of Team GB triathlete, a helicopter pilot on a reserve in South Africa who's dialing into classes. We ask the partners to share their knowledge and their expertise, but also to sometimes mentor the classes, to answer questions, to provide feedback on their final products, and we invite them along to their presentations of learning. A great example is we have a Pathfinder course, where all of our S3 students, they're about 14, 15 years old, take part in this course to look at potential pathways for when they leave school. And at the end of this course, they do a project for the last few months called How Can I Achieve My Dream Job? So they work with business partners, local partners, almost like an apprentice style, where they act as experts throughout the project. They introduce the project. They're there to mentor the classes, but the final product and presentation of learning is the students presenting to them on their dream job. Why is it their dream job? What skills would they need to complete this job? And why they should employ them. So it's almost like a mock interview, but for them to do that at that stage, we've got great feedback from the partners in that they can't believe they're articulating their skills and their learning and the experiences that they've already had to meet a potential dream job that they could do in the future. And we've had such a variety of ice road truckers, flight attendants, astronauts in there. And it might not be the job that they go on and do when they leave school, but it's the fact that they're already starting to think like that and they've already had that experience. As Nick said, we'd like to get to the stage where we're co-creating these projects with our business community partners, and we're heading in that direction. But at the moment, especially during and after COVID, we've had to rely on videos from these partners or dialing into classrooms, and it's not quite getting that same connection with the partners as face-to-face. And we deliver projects at the moment to full year groups of 150 to 200 pupils, where there could be 6, 7 or 8 classes all working on the same project at the same time. So we're trying to think creatively of how do we get these partners involved and in and talking face to face. And we do have plans of how we can make that work, but again, we're working on it.
Yeah, that's one of the big problems. But again, Hannah mentioned it. We need a Lucy, and Lucy just makes a lot of things possible. because that's taken away that structure, like I talked about. The teacher might have a great idea, but they can't make that happen without Lucy. She bridges a lot of our partnerships between the school and the community, which is fantastic. So everybody, you need a Lucy, but you can't have ours.
Yes.
There you go. You heard it. Everybody needs a Lucy. And what makes that work is that our community partners, our industry partners, they want to help in education. They just don't always know how, right? Like the engineer can't just show up on a Tuesday and say, can I help? Like we kind of need a Lucy to translate, to say, you've got this skill set. We could use that for this PBL unit, right? Or can you come in here? And they can kind of be the go-between that translate between our education world and the business world. And it really is a really neat position that can really springboard things in a really neat way. So super, super exciting work. So there you go. Get a Lucy. And you also hear Hannah and Nick talking about some struggles that they might have. It's like nothing's a finished product, right? It's not like, hey, we're a PBL school, so everything's perfect now, right? If you went and visited one of those schools that seems perfect, hopefully you asked some questions and found out they're not, but they're doing amazing things, right? And they're always iterating. It's always growth mindset. So in fact, what we're going to do, we're going to cap this episode here pretty quick. I've got 2 more questions, but then after this episode launches, we'll launch a second one where you can be a fly on the wall. And Hannah and Nick and I, we're just going to tune some problems. We're just going to put them out there, maybe do some likes and wonders, and we're just going to do the work in the podcast session. So be listening for that. This one will launch, and then right after that, we'll launch the kind of the working episode, right? We're just going to get in the work and have some fun. So one question, and then we'll see how people can connect to you. And this is how we connected actually on Twitter. You guys are a great follow on Twitter. Like I could tell from your Twitter feed what was going out, you're doing real project-based learning work. You're saying words that we value at Magnify Learning, that I value, right? Lifelong learners. You're talking about collaboration, community partners, authenticity of the work, all these things that we really appreciate. So you're a great follow on Twitter, and we'll give everybody that link in the show notes. But how does that fit into your culture, this idea of celebrating wins and just creating the positivity? Can you give us a couple examples that you guys use to celebrate these wins?
Yeah, we love to share our journey so far, and especially the successes of our students, which we're sharing on Twitter each week. But celebrating success is a key part of our school culture. For example, every Friday we have Hot Chocolate Friday with the head teacher, where students can be nominated by either their squad leader or by their teacher for something they've went above and beyond. And we link that to our school leaver profile skills. So it could be that somebody showed outstanding creativity that week or great teamwork in one of their project-based learning classes, and they'll get nominated for a hot chocolate.
Can I interrupt for just a second? Because what you celebrate, it grows, right? What you focus on grows. And I love that it wasn't hey, you aced this test, right? It was you showed outstanding creativity, right? That's what we celebrate here, right? That's what we want more of. That's so good. Keep going. This is great.
Yeah, my latest one was he showed great emotional intelligence, because I was just walking behind him in the corridor, seeing an older pupil supporting a younger pupil who was a bit worried about where he was going. And I put in a Hot Chocolate Friday nomination for his emotional intelligence and supporting those around him. But in terms of project-based learning, I suppose during COVID, we had to do a lot of structural changes. So we changed our school day. Every morning for 30 minutes, we have what we call squad, which is based on the concept of crew, which is what we've taken from some of the schools that we've visited. So every squad meets for 30 minutes with their peers and with their squad leader. And it's a peer and pastoral support system, but it helps support project-based learning in the sense that they come to their project-based learning classes with their squads. So they already have that culture of collaboration, of teamwork, of supporting each other, which has really facilitated our project-based learning process in the classroom as well. And then after squad every day, rather than having 6 or 7 classes in a day, we narrowed it down to 3 100-minute sessions. And those longer learning sessions really allow that deeper learning to take place in terms of project-based learning. It's a better opportunity for partners to come in and work with the students, or for the students, as we said, to go out to the community on things like community walks. And we now have an outdoor learning coordinator started this week, who is super keen to get our students outside and learning around our community. All members of staff at the start of this had an introduction to project-based learning, but certain staff were trained up a bit more intensively, with a slightly longer course. But what we started to see was pockets of project-based learning springing up around the school, and we showcased that work with staff on...
So a year ago?
Yeah, about a year ago now.
About a year ago, in an in-service. So it was a whole staff day, like an in-service training day, and the whole day was dedicated to project-based learning, where we had three of our teachers just shared their experience and their journey and then the impact that's had on their learners.
Yeah. And from that, it's kind of allowed us to expand. So we had that one pilot project-based learning class I mentioned, and that then expanded to all our junior classes, where they all get one session of dedicated project-based learning a week, but they also might experience it in other areas of the curriculum as well. So it's not just in that one class a week where they would be taking part in projects. But for me, a huge win is when I walk into a classroom, when I drop into a project-based learning class to see what's going on and I can't find the teacher, because rather than standing at the front with all the students facing the board, I walk in and all the students are working around groups. They're discussing, they're collaborating, they're being creative, they're problem solving, they're exploring their learning, and the teacher is somewhere in the middle of that facilitating rather than leading. And that happens nearly on a daily basis whenever I drop into a project-based learning class. And even Nick, as a member of the senior leadership team, teaches project-based learning classes, so he's experiencing it himself as well. And we recently had a parents' evening of our S1s, which is our youngest year group, where a lot of the feedback was project-based learning is what they're coming home and they're talking about and they're excited about. And well, you had a group where...
So much so, that was overwhelmingly the feedback from the parents' evening was, they hear most about the pupils learning in project-based learning classes. And so much so that it was like a small group of boys they're arranging sleepovers because they didn't have enough time to finish their project, and they're going to spend all night up in this bedroom finishing their project, which is exactly the kind of thing we want to hear. And that tells us that we're doing it right, and that's a big win. And even so much, there's classes as well that the one, we don't have bells in this school, but the one bell per se is looming, and they know this, but rather than getting sliding on their jackets and their bags, even if it's fish in the canteen, which is their favorite thing, they want to stay and finish their project because they're engrossed in what they're doing, and they're enjoying it so much that they don't want to leave, and they don't want to go and do lunch even, never mind their next class. So that's a big win for me. An unusual gauge of if it's working, but it certainly tells me that we're doing something magical and something that's making an impact.
The feedback that we've collected from the students, from staff, from parents has been so positive. It's allowed us to expand even more. So we now have a project-based learning team where we have Lucy, our business community support lead. There's the two of us. We've also got 3 project-based learning teachers, outdoor learning coordinator, so we can collaboratively plan, deliver, and evaluate these projects. So our plan for next year is to expand with our new students that will be coming up from our primary schools, is to expand and deliver project-based learning to a large section of their curriculum.
So rather than looking at sort of 100-minute blocks, we're maybe thinking about going to like whole days of project-based learning, which is exciting because we're kind of listening to the pupil voice again and seeing the feedback that what we're doing right now is great, and it's been a big step change to the traditional model, but it's maybe still a structure that's in the way of supporting that learning experience that we're trying our best to remove. So it provides the space and the environment that's going to promote learning, and then we just need to think about bringing in experts, whether it's subject experts or business and community experts, into that mix, which will be exciting.
I love hearing you guys is just continuing to iterate and celebrating the wins again, right? But with students, with staff, with parents, and then sharing those, right? Like, hey team, right? The parents are loving this, right? Which we see often, right? Like kids are actually excited to bring that back. It's like, well, do you give homework? No, but kids tend to like have sleepovers and work on their own, right? It's like that's right. It's authentically getting the work done. So you're a great Twitter follow. We'll have that in the show notes. How else can people connect with you to follow your journey?
So any of our school social media sites does showcase our learning each week and the journey that we've been on so far, and particularly that Twitter page that we connected through. But also if anyone wants to get in contact through our directly through our school website at banffacademy.co.uk.
Okay. Well, we will be sure to share that with the audience because I know people are going to want to jump in. Just hearing your story, how things are progressing, the growth mindset behind it. I really appreciate all the value that you shared with our school leaders today. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you for
having
having
us.
us.
All right, PBL Simplified audience, you just got a great case study in how to start PBL. You know, you can start by that first inkling of, hey, something might not be right here. And then you go look, see what other people are doing, find the structures at work, and then bring it to your school and dabble, right? Start small, but systematically share the wins and grow. And we'll see where Banff Academy goes, but you can continue on this journey. Magnify Learning is obviously here to support you. And hopefully this podcast is supporting you as well so that you can engage your learners, tackle boredom, and transform your classrooms.